This is London Calling. I'm Tash, and you're listening to BuccanEar, your source for what they don't want you to know. Today we're talking about Dev Hassani, our gone, but sadly not forgotten Prime Minister. It's strange to think that he was just another here today, gone tomorrow politician until his infamous London is drowning speech went viral. The forces of darkness he unleashed with that speech changed everything around us. Was Hassani's rise inevitable? Could it have been stopped? And what happens when democracy starts to breed the ideas that can destroy it? Using back channels and underground contacts, we got in touch with political analysts and historians to find out how it's possible for cynical, short-term leaders like our beloved Prime Minister to give birth to political nightmares. No full names, as you know. These days, telling the truth can get you killed. Helen spelt out the dangers of populism for major political magazines and websites back in the pre-censorship days.
The appeal of fascist politics is about strongmen, and they are usually men, because it's about saying there are simple problems that are really easy to define, say immigration, and there are simple solutions to them, stop immigration. And they are really appealing because they make sense of a world that can often feel really complicated and confusing, and they do offer, or seem to offer, action, instead of what politics can often be, which is a kind of messy set of compromises where no one gets really what they want, everyone gets a little bit of it. And that's the problem, really, is you end up in a situation where it looks like someone is going to do something incredible and transformative, but of course either it never really delivers, or it delivers at a huge cost to, for example, dehumanizing people. And I think you see that in the rhetoric around immigration. If you say immigrants are a problem, we're going to stop them, it's a legitimate political stance for a country to want to control its borders, but the way that that's done can often end up being very cruel and inhumane, because what you have said is immigrants specifically are the problem. Not every fascist is a populist, but they are two interlinked styles of government, really, because what fascists tend to do is rely on narratives of deep change and of enemies. I think that's one of the hallmarks of this style of politics, where you represent your opponents not just as people who disagree with you, but as existential threats, as evil people. So you see it in the course of the run-up to the Second World War, where Jewish people are represented as, rats and a scourge. You see it with Muslims, where they are represented as coming to take over and replace white people. So you have big defined groups of enemies that the person who is trying to convince you to vote for them, or later on simply to support their regime perhaps, needs to defeat. There is always an enemy to be defeated. Unfortunately, one of the things we're very bad at as humans is recognizing different things when they don't look like previous examples. So I think in pre-crisis Britain we had an idea that when fascism came it would look again like the 1930s. It would look like a single charismatic leader. It would look like a jackboots in the street and huge flags. And it didn't look like that. It looked like social media groups. It looked like poisoning the well so that no information could be trusted. It had its own specific flavor, and that, I think, blinded people, as did a kind of complacency that things aren't ever going to get that bad ever again. That's a problem for the past. We're much more sophisticated now. We're not going to succumb to these great moods of emotion where everyone is hysterically listening to a leader. Well, guess what? People don't change that much.
Where do authoritarians come from? Before the crisis, Ian was a senior journalist covering the global rise of the strongmen.
Populism started to rise as a response to a series of crises. Now, some of these were true, some of them were false. There was a financial crisis. People were poorer. They were less secure than they were. They were looking for easy answers. There was a refugee crisis. I mean, the extent to which that was an actual crisis is frankly questionable. There wasn't actually that many people coming over. But what you had was mainstream news reflecting really quite right-wing rhetoric, portraying what was ultimately a trickle of boat to some major crisis hitting the country. And once you get into that situation, you are primed for having authoritarian leaders with fictitious but easy answers come along with a populist message and basically say to you, look, I will take care of the problem. I will make it all go away. So how do populists capture existing political parties or institutions? The truth is this usually happens in about three different ways. The first one is the easiest one. You set up a party, you win an election, you take over. But that doesn't actually happen that often. The second way is a bit more common, which is that you basically find yourself in coalition with usually a mainstream right-wing party. And this has happened this is exactly what happened, of course, in the 1920s in Italy with Mussolini. It's exactly what happened in the 1940s in Germany with Adolf Hitler, which is that the mainstream bring them into power and And there they think they can control them, but you can never control this kind of party. They will always take charge. The third way is the most pernicious and the one that we recognise least. And that's when basically from the opposition, from the media, right-wing populists get their message out against immigrants, against corrupt elites, supposedly corrupt elites, and just pump out that message, pump out these frames of reference, and by virtue of that they take control of the political dialogue from well away from power.
It's easy to slide from democracy to totalitarianism. It's a lot harder to fight your way back again. But that's what we're here for. You've been listening to BuccanEar with me, Tash. Thanks to our guests for having the courage to talk to us. Keep listening, tell your friends, and spread the word. There's nobody to fix this but us.